Welcome to the show, folks. This is Wrestling Changed My Life. Here we go.
Back then, trash talking worked. No one really did that before me.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if they gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Welcome back to the one and only Wrestling Changed My Life podcast. It's raining in Chicago this morning. It's about 6:16 a.m., but Frank Trigg is here. UFC Hall of Famer Frank Trigg is our guest today. He's known as Twinkle Toes, one of the original heels of the UFC, and of course, he's in the Hall of Fame for his epic battles with Matt Hughes, who was one of my early UFC heroes. So it's a real honor to talk to Frank and bring it full circle. Fan of the week goes to Eric Bayless. He's the owner of Hopsmith and Fat Pour, two of my favorite taverns here in the Windy City. Eric, thanks for listening to the show. We appreciate it. Last but not least, folks, if you want to subscribe to our text messaging service, text WRESTLE, WRESTLE, to the number 22454. Text WRESTLE to 22454. We'll send you episode updates, merch updates, all kinds of good stuff at WRESTLE22454. That's it, folks. Let's give it up for Frank Trigg. Frank Trigg, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Dude, we were just yucking it up about your family, and I was fascinated to learn that you were raised in a wolf den of 6 other boys. Is that right?
Yeah. 7 of the boys.
7.
7 of them. Yeah. There's a stepbrother was raised with us too. So there's 7 of us, so 6 other brothers with a family unit, and then we had a stepbrother raised with us. So there's a total of 8. All boys. Yeah. They're all super studs. Like a couple of them have to carry guns for a living. Like this is their job, and I have other ones that live overseas, and their job is to work for the government in some form or fashion. I have one brother that works for the Saudi government, but he's the liaison between the U.S. government and the Saudi government because of what he did for the U.S. government, and so they recruited him, and now he's the guy that talks back and forth. And it's like everyone in my family is like super squared away. I'm the only guy that's really not got all my shit together. to be quite honest.
Were they all athletes as kids? Like, what was the experience like growing up in the Trigg household?
One was an All-American at the Naval Academy as a wrestler. One 101st Airborne. Was athletic in high school, but nothing that like he's not gonna talk about the 4 touchdowns he had at Polk High School his senior year. It's just like it's not what we do. My younger brother, once immediately younger than me, was actually a better wrestler than me. Got recruited a couple of universities, but chose to go the law route instead, and now works overseas as an attorney for the U.S. Trying to think. I was probably the most athletic. My 2 older brothers both had scholarships to play football at the college level, and for whatever reason, one went in the military. One still battles me because he never stopped battles with alcoholism and drug abuse, and so that went a different route. But now he's very successful. What he's doing right now, but it delayed his growth because of getting stuck in that. You kind of mentally get stuck at being 17, 16 years old, and obviously you're 25. You're like, wow, I've been an alcoholic for all these years. I got to fix myself, and then you start your pattern. So it took him a little while. But I was probably the most athletic out of all of them. But my younger brother, immediate younger brother, was probably the better athlete of the group, but chose a totally different route. And I just kept sticking with it.
And were your parents people who were like super sports parents, or it was kind of on your own to get it done?
On my own to get it done. That many kids, you gotta handle. There's too many moving parts. There's always something. So drop this kid off at practice, go take this kid to this other practice, go grab this kid's homework, dinner, whatever, blah, blah. And then, try to put it all together and then pick up this kid from practice, get home, get homework started, get dinner put on the table. Like, it's like they weren't very, as a matter of fact, as you look back at it, now I'm 48, I look back at it and go, my parents actually weren't very supportive at all of my sports. It was almost like a babysitter for them, where, okay, I know where this kid is. I know what he's going to be doing from this time to this time. I know he's going to be okay. Go. Just go. And you're going to be fine. And that's kind of how it was. It kept us from selling drugs. It kept us from, I didn't start drinking until I was 24, 25, because I had no time. I was too busy trying to compete. I didn't have time to drink, in my mind. I mean, obviously there's other wrestlers in Western New York that were drinking at the same time. Some of them were better than me at the high school level and even at the college level. I just in my mind was like, if I drink, I'm just going to get worse. I can't do it. But it kept us kind of on a straight and narrow. We couldn't run around with our friends. We couldn't, do crazy stuff because we were too busy at practice. It was kind of that was kind of like a babysitter, education. And back then wrestling was only men. There was no women really. I mean, you might have one or two in a whole state, the rest at your age group, but there's nothing like it is now. So it was all dudes, and we're run by men. We had men coaches, and so you learned, how to do man stuff from other men, and then you go home and your dad teaches you man stuff to do other stuff with men. So it was like this, this what is it? How do they say? It takes a tribe to raise a child.
Yes.
It really much was that tribe situation where, a lot of the parents, became surrogate parents, because
Definitely.
You're around them all the time. So.
And you're seeing people at their lowest. I mean, there's nothing lower than going to a tournament with someone else's parents. Their kid wins it. You go like 1-2, and then they got to see you there. That's vulnerable.
I think I say it's 0-32, but it might have been like 0-18 my first year wrestling. I didn't win one match. I just sucked. I mean, I was horrible. And so talking about the lowest, they had to deal with me. Like the first beginning, I was very frustrated because I kept losing. And then it became such a norm for me. I didn't care like the second half of the season. I was like, I'm just going to lose anyway. So what, why even care about it? Why even get emotional about it? And that's when everyone started like, hey, look, you got to get like some emotion about this. You can't just accept losing all the time. And that was kind of one of those deals where they had to like teach me how not to accept losing, in the very beginning.
Right. Well, I mean, it carried through because, everyone knows you for your UFC career. You're a UFC Hall of Famer. We're going to talk about the Matt Hughes fights because Matt Hughes was my guy and I'll never forget those. But I really want to know, how'd you get to Oklahoma and Jack Spates in the early 90s? That seems so random to me.
So I actually got recruited as a recruited walk-on to go to Oklahoma State, who had just won the back-to-back national titles. And I would have been a paid recruit if I had won the state tournament. I lost the semifinals, but we had super sectionals, which is like you have to win super sectionals to go on to the states. And back then there was only one states for all classes, A, B, C, D. You had one state champion for all classes, and that's the way it is. Now you have, I believe in New York, they have a state tournament for each class, A, B, C, and D. Like for us, we had our sectionals, which was all your class. So like all the big schools were A, the small schools were D. Then you have your super sectionals with the top 4 of each class. So it was a group of 16. You show up and you wrestle, and the guy that wins super sectional goes. Where I lost to my arch rival in the semifinals and didn't go to state. So all my scholarships that were on the table all got pulled because I didn't win the state tournament. And I was like ranked 3rd or 4th or something in the state. I beat a couple of former state champs throughout the season. So I kind of got ranked, and they were like, yeah, you win state, 100% we give you scholarships. And then they got pulled. So I was like, I'm being recruited, walked on to everywhere. At this point, I might as well go to the best schools recruiter walk on. So I went to Oklahoma State. Unfortunately, Joe C., the head coach then, who's just passed away a little while ago due to cancer, he had some recruiting violations. And Oklahoma State got pushed out of the national tournament for a couple of years. So all the redshirt freshmen basically just transferred out, right? And so I went to Phoenix College in Phoenix, Arizona. Did 2 years there, right? Got my associate's degree, and it was like, okay, now I'm going to transfer back to a 4-year. I got recruited by the major programs. Back then it was, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma U, Syracuse, Edinburgh, the East Coast ones, like, Buffalo, like those ones. And I realized at that point, like, this isn't going to last forever. I got to get a degree, otherwise I'm not going to have a job. I'm going to make any money. So where am I going to go? They're going to make sure I'm going to be able to graduate. Jack Spates was that guy. Jack Spates is the guy that he back then was doing, I want to say 96% graduation rate. Like if you came to him, you were going to graduate. He was going to make you graduate one way or the other. You were getting out of there with a degree. And that was like very important to me. Because my dad always said, at some point athletics is going to end on you. No matter what you want to do, no matter how you want to run it, you're not going to have any more athletics. What are you going to do? You got to have a job, and you got to have some way to get that job. So I need to have a degree. So I went to OU, and that's how I ended up. And it was weird because I started Oklahoma State and then went to Oklahoma U. This was like a weird thing, but that's not really what happened. It's just that at the time when I had to make a choice, that was the school that was going to get me to be able to get my degree, and so that's where I went.
So Spates was known as kind of like someone who would help you in your business life as well back then.
His whole thing was building All-Americans on and off the mat. That was his saying. I'm gonna make you an All-American off the mat as well. And he made everybody kind of, into the understanding of how life works once you're out of college. You got to understand that you got to have a job. And back then there wasn't podcasts, there wasn't internet servicing stuff, and you didn't have those things. You had to go get a 9 to 5. That was your job, or you're going to be in sales. Like that was it. It was the only two routes you kind of had was go do medical sales or go get a 9 to 5 job doing whatever. And so it was like we really had to press, and it was great because now now you got guys making whatever, a couple $1 million a year on TikTok, a couple $1 million a year on Instagram. You're like, that was unheard of. We actually had to get a real job and do something significant. This is before the Kardashians popped off. This is before Paris Hilton came out. Like this is way back. So we actually had real jobs, and he was like, you got to have something. So he just made it, and he forced it and instilled that in us. And we argued and fussed and fight. And by the time you graduated, I don't think anybody really liked him. Like you loved him as a freshman, hated him as a senior. Like you're like, I just want to kill this guy. He's a pain in my ass. He pushes me too hard. He doesn't. But then obviously you go back and look at him 20 years later, you're like, wow, thank God he did that. Because I never would have finished. I never would have went through that process. I never would have wrote that paper. I never would have went and did that debate. I would have just, fumbled my way through and being part of the program,
How was the transition from East Coast to living in the middle of Oklahoma?
Weird. It's a hot topic right now in the U.S. because I'm mixed, black father, white mother. So that going to Oklahoma, it's in New York, it's kind of like a Puerto Rican, are you Colombian? Are you Guatemalan? Like, we can't really tell. You kind of, it's like this weird thing. You go to Oklahoma, they know you're black right away. 100%, they know. So it's like you're too white to be black, if you're black to be white. So I'm kind of in that weird zone where I'm just stuck in the middle. You have acquaintances, you have people who'll talk to you, but you're not going to go have Thanksgiving dinner with them. But wrestling is that group where you got kids from all over the country popping into the Midwest, right? So when I went to Oklahoma State, the first guy that ever talked to me on campus was Randy Couture. That was the first guy that ever talked to me on campus. Like nobody, like 3 days, nobody talked to me on campus. I ended up bumping into the guy that I saw walking out of the locker room, when I was walking into the locker room one day to go get a sauna workout in, and he just started chatting me up, whatever. And Randy and I have now been friends for 28 years, 29 years, whatever. So it's been, it's like that, where you're like, geez, it's tough. It's a tough transition. And I talk fast. I have a lot of hand movements. I don't have the same draw. I don't have the same understanding. Oklahoma State is a rural school. It's an agricultural school. So it's a lot of veterinarians come out of there. So it's a lot of cows and horses and sheep and, stuff I wasn't used to and didn't understand. And so it's a transition, but it's also a growing period when you go to college. You got to learn, you got to put yourself out there to kind of get a new experience and grow and develop. And that was one of the growing times. Same thing at OU. OU is a little bit more business oriented, oriented, but still it's a group of people where you don't really understand what they're talking about when they talk about first time I'd ever heard Friday Night Lights. They kept talking about Friday Night Lights, and all these kids from Texas, Friday Night Lights. Like, what are you talking about? Like, high school football games, man. I'm like, what? Like, that's a thing for you guys? We might show up for homecoming, if there's a if the girl I'm dating from the rival high school, we happen to play in that high school, then I might go to the game. But I mean, it's not that big of a deal. And to them, it's a religion.
Oh yeah.
Like, down in Texas, it's a religion. Like Friday nights is a big deal. I was like, and I had to learn that, and trying to understand. We talking about like we're just going to drive, we're just going to drive down to Dallas real quick. Like to me, Dallas was like a whole different world. 2.5 hours away.
Yeah,
it was 2.5 hours away. I was like, what are you talking about, Dallas? Like that's a whole different state. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, no, it's just right there. Let's drive down. I'm like, okay, well. And so I learned these things, how to pick it up and but it was tough. It was tough. It was not easy. But nothing in your life should be easy if it's going to be rewarding.
And that's like that also critical journey of like boy becoming a man and kind of getting out there on the own. And, you experience those lonely moments and you experience, good moments as well. I mean, see, I didn't even know you went to Oklahoma State till you said that, because I coincidentally am doing a documentary on John Smith right now. And I've been down to Oklahoma a lot in August and September. And, the Joe C leaving is a pretty big deal because then John had to come in and coach. Yeah. Dude, that team was freaking loaded, though. Chris Barnes, all those dudes.
Yeah, Chris Barnes, Randy Couture, the Priller twins, Alan Freed. Who else is on that team?
Obviously, Pat.
Corey Bays and Eddie Woodburn were still there coaching. They had just come off the team. Glenn Lanham, who's now the head coach at Duke, was there. Had just finished up. And you walk in that room, Kenny Monday. Like you walk in there, you're like, Whoa. I mean, there were days, legit days. Pat Smith, Alan Freed, Chuck Barbie were basically my training partners. There would be a week where I wouldn't score a takedown in practice, not one takedown. And I'm talking about kicking, screaming, mad, foaming at the mouth, going crazy, can't get one takedown. You're like, can't get off the bottom. Got Pat Smith riding you for a half hour in practice, you can't get him off you. Like, this is just nuts. I mean, it's a whole new world. It's a whole new level of a guy coming from an area where you're like, I would always get away. I would always take a guy down. I would always put him on his back. It would never fail me. Never fail me. Show up in that room, you're like, dude, good luck. Good luck. Man, and the Perla twins would pull me to the side and be like, you'll get it. Just keep working. You'll get it. Just keep working. It happens to all of us. It happens to all. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't happen to all of you. How about you gotten it? And then, we get where we get. But yeah, it was like one of those deals, man. That room was a killer room. It was a killer room.
If they didn't have those violations, they could have gone on a run themselves. If Joe would have stayed. Yeah.
I think, personally, they probably would have did at least 2 more, maybe 3 more. But then depending on recruiting, also you can have a 10-year run, and be like Iowa, Oklahoma State, then all of a sudden Penn State, or Minnesota, then Penn State. Like it could have been that run. Like that's where, but it didn't happen that way. And that's how it goes. Like you have that problem where there are so many things you got to deal with, at the college level to keep regulations and keep, and the thing is that the violation was an athlete that was best friends with a recruited athlete going to the training camp, going to the camp that the school was putting on. So Oklahoma State's putting on this camp for the local area. And one of the guys who was at the school drove the kid that was recruited. There was a recruit. He already signed. He was coming to the school, gave him a ride, but he hadn't started class yet. That's a recruiting violation. That spun everything out of control. Cost Chuck his last year. Cost Chuck his national title. Chuck Joe would have won the national title that year. Cost him his year. Done.
Cost Joe his job. Joe never coached again.
Never coached again. One of the best international and national wrestling coaches on the planet never coached again. No one ever trusted to pick him up again. No. It was like, man, it was crazy how hard that was. And he applied everywhere. He applied everywhere to keep coaching. No one would touch him.
It's like Watergate. The cover-up was worse than the crime. The cover-up was the reason everyone got, the lying and all that. It's just like, to me, it's just a lot of wasted money by the NCAA. But, once you lie to them, you're fucked. And what are you going to do? And, I read a story. Go ahead.
No. So I was going to say, like, they're and that's their thing. It's like, you tell us the truth, we'll give you a little low. It's like you see now in MMA. These guys come on and go, hey, you got caught with a picogram of testosterone in your system. You're right. I took it. I stopped taking it 6 weeks ago. I got caught. Okay, you have a 6-month ban. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know how I got that. I don't know how it got in my system. I don't know what's going on. Guess what? You got a 5-year ban. Like, yeah, but this guy had the exact same amount. Yeah, but he told us he had it. You try to lie your way around it. Now we're gonna have to dump it on you, and that's what the NCAA is like. And they're criminals. The NCAA is criminals. They're just a bunch of freaking thugs and criminals. Like they are. They honestly. I don't know if you do follow Mike DeSabato, Ohio State guy. Real good friends with Kevin Randleman when he was living, and great friends with Mark Coleman. Wrestled at Ohio State. Obviously, backs that program still. Very wealthy, but backs the program. And he's like not paying football players. Like giving football players at the college level a salary is ridiculous. The amount of money when the schools got closed down for the pandemic, they're not worried about kids coming for class. They're still charging. You do your class virtually now. You do it over Zoom, but you still have to pay us the same amount. Even though you're not in school, you're at your home, it's still $40,000 a semester. It doesn't change. What they were complaining about, we have to get football back on the field because that's where all the money comes from. Well, if you're a national championship team, the ACC, SEC, those guys, we're talking $30, $40 million a year as a donation from the football program being on and winning games.
Oh, yeah.
Well, what do the athletes get? We gave you a room. We gave you some food. We gave you some books. Gave you some athletic clothes to wear around. And we gave you tuition. That's great. That's about $50,000. I'm your star quarterback. I literally won the Heisman. Are you trying to tell me that I can't get paid for this? I can't work, right? Because I'm practiced all the time and studying, so I can't go get another job like everybody else can. So it's crazy. The NCAA, in my personal opinion, is still a bunch of thugs. They are still just a bunch of idiots. They're out there trying to make as much money as possible for themselves and make nothing and not give anything away. Really, honestly, I hate to say it, especially in this climate, kind of like slave labor. It kind of is because you're giving me $50,000 a semester, $100,000 a year to make your program $30 million. Like, how does that work out, man? That's like, what is it, 3 cents on the dollar? It's nuts.
Especially when you talk about your alma mater, OU. That's like big time. That's like Ohio State level. That's real money at OU. I mean, so is OSU, don't get me wrong, but OU is just another level.
For football, it's another level.
For football.
We had some lean years, and then, baseball, softball, men and women's gymnastics for a while. We're on a run. Like, we were killing stuff, it was amazing how well the sports program, but like any sports program, I mean, if any sport at any level, eventually, Lewis Hamilton can't always win at Formula One. At some point, he's going to fall off, though. He's the guy right now.
Right.
Tom Brady's not always going to be at the Patriots. He's not always going to win every championship. At some point, he's going to fall off. Well, guess what? Now he's with Tampa Bay. I mean, this is what sports. This is how it happens. So eventually, everyone's going to fall off. But man, you go to OU. If you've never been to a big program, big football program, and it's like your first time as a student athlete, which I've never been a big football program. Never. I show up, and you're like, that's Barry Switzer. I heard about that guy all the time. Like, what the hell's he doing in the stands? He got violated. He's out, but he's still there. He's still there watching the games.
Wow.
You're like, this is incredible. It's a huge deal. It's a whole new level of athleticism, and you realize these coaches are getting paid back then. $2.5 million a year. Now it's way more than that. I think Saban gets like $8 million or something a year. But back then, that was a huge amount of money. You're like, okay, now I understand why this guy's driving the brand new Beamer. I understand why he's driving the brand new Mercedes. I get why he's got the $1 million home. I understand all these things now. And you watch these guys come through and they're, custom-made suits and there's custom-made stuff and they're trunching around. And you're like, okay, this is a business. This is not a sport anymore. This is a real – college athletics is a business. It's to make money for the university at every level. Every sport is to make money.
Especially when you're the first time you're there and they're your own age, or especially now when – they're all younger than all of us, right? When we watch Saturday football, they're way younger. You're like, how the hell is that dude just a normal college student? And I mean, like, the first thing I always think of is like, what is his like dating scene like? He must just get flooded with requests. It's like those dudes, it's just a whole other world, and girls, And
there's a former judo player, Roddy Ferguson, is a PhD, lives down in Florida, but he wrote a book and it's about your partnership and your relationships. And you watch these guys get out and make the next jump, make the next level. They go from college to the NCAA. And you see the guys, well, now, even take it back a step. You start recruiting and you're looking at them. When the team is looking at them, they look at everything about them. Not only the grades, and grades don't matter. It doesn't matter. They just want to see, can you complete tasks? You were given a task to complete sociology. How'd you do in sociology? You were given a task to do these things. Obviously, you don't need a degree to play in the NCAA, and a lot of guys don't. Or excuse me, in the NFL. A lot of these guys don't. But now we're starting to look at their family, their cousins, their girlfriends. What rumors are going around behind the scenes on them? Are there sexual assault rumors? No charges, but rumors going on. Is this going to be an issue? Is this going to be a problem? Because now you're the number one, you're the first round draft pick for our program, whatever it is, and you're out in a bar getting now more sophisticated, better women being thrown at you. What are you going to do? How are you going to react? Are you a good person? Do you have a good heart? Like, they have to start looking at these things, and it really is about the partner that a lot of these guys come with. If they've got a great partner, the reason why Tom Brady, one of the reasons, we can break it down to 100 million different parts. One of the reasons why he's such a great athlete, still to this day, what is he, 40 now, 41? Because he has a great partner. Giselle is a great partner. She understands being in the high life, having people being thrown at you. She's a supermodel. Like, you understand, she gets it. She understands it, so they know how to deal with it together. It's about having that partner. And in college, most of these guys are, most athletes, me included, we're kind of nerds. We kind of show up. We're so embedded into our sport. We don't really know how to talk. We don't really know what the dating scene's like. We're not really sure of ourselves. Yeah, we're great in our field of play. We're not great outside that field of play. Like, what do we do? And sometimes you make bad choices and bad partnerships, and then all of a sudden you're in this partnership and you're there, and they have a different plan than you do. They want to have the big house, the big car. They want to buy everything. They want to have the diamonds and show that they're with an NFL player. And then this other person, and your mindset is like, just focus on the task at hand. Let's just get through this. Let's just get on the team. I still have to get through training camp. Let me just get on the team first, and then things go like that. It's a lot of it's about the partnerships that they pick going through. And so we go back to your point of their dating scenes. Yeah, a guy's got potential. A guy that wins a big game. Like, everybody wants to be the campus hero. Everybody wants that. You want to get an NCAA title in wrestling in Iowa University? What do you think? Like, what do you think is going to happen? Of course, everybody wants to be with the hero. Everybody wants to say, I'm with that guy or gal who just won the national title. Everybody wants to say that. And so it's tough. It's a hard scene, but you got to be, you got to stick your head up and figure it out. And it's another one of those, we talked earlier, it's another one of those challenges. You got to figure it out.
Dude, you're talking about a subject that's near and dear to me right now. I'm 31. I have a girlfriend, but the managing of relationships of people who are both into their own world, like, she does her thing and I'm into my thing, that's a really tricky thing. And you mentioned something that I wanted to segue into was, do you still run the blog where you give dating advice for women? Or
no, I don't. And part of that is because my ex-wife's family, no matter what I said or what I did, would spend 5 days after every blog post on the website I was on just bad-mouthing it. And they would spend most of the time out there having to delete and remove all these things. And they were finally like, look, it's just too much of a headache. Like, it's just not the amount of income we have coming in, the amount of time we're spending on just maintaining your blog. Because there was like vicious, vile, like stuff you can't have out, because it was a PG-rated blog page. And
but it was like the most read blog they would do, right? When it would go out?
Yeah.
Tell people what it is, because people can't even believe this.
So basically what I was doing is telling you through my mistakes, my mishaps, it wasn't like, don't do this because I don't know what you're talking about. I'm telling you what not to do because I did it. This is how I screwed up. This is how I messed up my marriage, how I messed up my dating scene. This is how I messed up, my kids' lives. This is what I did wrong. Learn from my mistakes was the whole point of it. And learning from and showing them, like, yeah, you're right. I should have done that. You're right. I should have sent that text. I should have made that phone call. I should have been at the bar past 1:30 in the morning. I shouldn't have been out riding around in a car with this person, late at night. I should not have done these things. And so that's where the whole premise of it was. And then the ex's family was just so bitter and bent over, they couldn't get over it. So it's kind of like, all right, well, I just shut it off. And then we moved on to doing just MMA blogs. And then ended up being better because it was a longer run, and it being a 8-year run or a 9-year run of doing MMA blogs for different websites.
It's incredible the amount of content you kick out. One last question on that, though. Why didn't you do it for guys versus girls? That's what I think is the interesting part, is that girls read it more than guys. I'm fascinated by
because it was started out as a blog for guys. It really was. And then girls just kept reading. Girls were putting in all the questions. We're adding in all the questions. So you had to tier it to, you have to understand your crowd. You have to understand your audience. So like the audience was becoming women. So it just became, this is how guys think. Is basically what it came out to, is like, this is what guys are looking. So if your guy is doing this is actually what he's thinking. You've seen that meme where she's like they're both in bed and she's like, I know he's thinking about another girl right now. He's actually rolled over. Like, I wonder how I'm going to get out of a triangle lock tomorrow in jiu-jitsu practice. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, just because a guy's not talking to you or not being communicative at that moment doesn't mean he's thinking about some other chick. He's got something else on his mind. You have to now ask them, what is the deal about being on their mind? Like, what is happening? What is going on in your world? What's happening in your little universe right now, in your own little space? Because relationships are two spheres that have to overlap at some point. If they never overlap, it's not a relationship. It's just two people that are roommates. You have to make this overlapping position, and what's going to happen, how is it going to work, and it's hard. Like, you look at Austin and Paige Van Zandt, their marriage. They're both fighters. They're both, for a while she was the upper dog, now he's the upper dog, and they're kind of floating up and down. But at first you're kind of like, it's kind of annoying to pay attention to. It's kind of weird paying attention to them. You're like, wow, that relationship really works. Like, they got it down. You got to kind of pay attention to them because they understand to have two pro athletes underneath the same house, working towards the same goal at the same time, trying to figure these things out. It's hard. Ooh. Same thing with Raquel Pennington and Tesha Torres. Two pro fighters underneath the same roof, trying to figure out their lives. And it's not easy. Don't think it's all fun and games. They're all happy about it all the time. But these are two couples that kind of like, today's, she's being a pain in my ass today. She's cutting weight. Like, this just sucks. Like, I'm not in training camp right now. Yeah, I'm going to practice, but I'm not in training camp. I'm not as intense. But all of a sudden, I'm on a diet because she's on a diet. It's like, how does that work? I'm like, yeah, listen, I get it. I understand. Yeah, it's like, this is how it works. So it's interesting to see how people are handling things now. But relationships are hard. It's a constant process every day. Every day it's a work in progress.
There's nothing harder in life. And I've gone through a couple of phases where I was engaged and I wasn't. And then like a year after, you're feeling good. You're like, I got life mastered. But then you're like, oh yeah, I don't have a partner. So like when you add that in, it's whole another level.
There's your mistake. I have life mastered, except I don't have a partner. Why do you need a partner to have your life mastered? Right? You have your life mastered. Yeah. Your partner is the bonus to life being mastered. It doesn't complete your life being mastered. It's the bonus too. There's a bunch of single people that have their life mastered, a shit ton. There's a bunch of people that are married that can't figure their life out at all. You got to figure yourself out first, and then your partner comes in, and that partner is the bonus on top of it. It's the cherry on top. It's the whipped cream on top. It's the extra. I got everything else is going great, and now I have a great partner. Boom. That's the thing on top. Because remember, if the partner comes in, you have your life mastered, your partner comes in, your life starts to fall apart, that's not the partner. You got to get rid of the partner. You dump it off because now your life is starting to fall apart. Something's wrong, and the only thing I added was the partner. Everything else was great before that. Now we're having problems. Okay, get out. Get out.
But
how many times have you argued? How many times have you fought? How many times like, can we have a Thanksgiving now without arguing with my dad? Can you have a Christmas now without arguing with my mom? You're like, all right, just say we're over. We're done. It's not going to work. Like, you're right. Like, we've been arguing the last 5 years in a row. At every family holiday, your family hates me. Let's just either not see your family ever again, which is not fair to you, or we're gonna have to go separate ways.
Call a spade a spade, right?
Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard, man, because it's familiar and it's comfortable, and it's and who the hell wants to go through a breakup? Now breakups are like divorces. You live together, you have bills together, you bank accounts together, you own cars together. Like it's like a divorce. It's hard. You got to separate all that stuff out. You got dogs. You might have a kid.
No dogs.
Figure that out. It's just like, geez, man.
It's brutal to think about. And, when you think about your life of trying to rise through the ranks and be one of the best fighters in the world, it was only amplified 100 times. And I wouldn't be doing the audience justice, Mr. Frank Trigg, if we didn't spend a little bit of time on some fighting stuff. One of my first questions was, when you first met Patrick Burris, did you have any aspirations of kind of how your life would be in the next 10, 15 years?
No, none. It was weird. So Pat and Christy, they were like, just come do judo. Just come over to USA Stars and do judo. Just come by and check it out, whatever. Quincy Clark had been over there. He was a runner-up in the national tournament for OU, and then ended up being on the Greco team for a couple of years, but made that transition. What was doing judo was just like screwing around with it. It's like, just come over and screw around. Now, good news is that Patrick had a wrestling background as well as a judo background, so he kind of understood my mentality. And I showed up and just started competing, just started training. And then Kyle was like, oh, let me see how good I am at this. Let me go compete. I went and competed and was like, okay, it's not bad at the local circuit. Let's kind of see what I do. And then went to the bigger circuit and got smashed up. It was just like, oh, okay, these are guys who've been doing nothing but judo since they were 6, 7 years old, like wrestlers. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. it's a different mentality. Yeah, there's a little bit of crossover, but the reality of it is that, Mike Swain is a great judo player. Jimmy Pedro is a great judo player. Decent wrestlers, right? But they're, I think Pedro's a 2-time world champ. You're like, decent wrestler, amazing judo player. Like, just because you play basketball doesn't mean you can go play baseball, Michael Jordan.
Right.
Just because you're great at basketball doesn't mean you're great at something else. We think we are. It doesn't work like that. I mean, it's the time in, the experience, the rough. And so when I started with Pat and Chris, I had no idea. Had no idea I was ever going to be in the fighting game. Fighting wasn't really a thing at that point. And remember, I had Severn's brother as my coach at Phoenix College. So he had talked about it a little bit. Hey, my brother's doing this thing where he fights. He makes like $80,000. It's a big deal. He paid off his house up in Michigan. It's a huge thing. And you're like, oh, okay. And now I'm in Arizona, where they both went to Arizona State. So it was like they were right there. And Dan and Dave were still kind of in the area, but obviously, Dan went on and fought, and that was kind of what happened. And you're like, it was on my radar, but it wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, it was, we're talking 94, 95. UFC was 94. You know what I'm saying? It was just brand new. It was just a new thing. No weight classes. Who's going to fight Tank Abbott? Like, it was like, so it wasn't a top class of these kind of things. They didn't have weight classes, One of my first fights was against Paul Herrera, who was back then was Tank Abbott's main training partner. And they now they don't talk. They fought some breakup, whatever happened business wise, But they were like, I fought Paul and beat Paul. It was like a big. All of a sudden, Tank wants to fight me. I'm like, you're 265 pounds, man. I'm 165 pounds. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And coming from a wrestling background, we have weights. I'm like, there's no way.
No way.
So had no idea where my life was going to go when I first showed up with Pat. Had no clue at all. None whatsoever. And he asked me, hey, do you want to make a couple $100? Go and fight this guy. I'm like, sure. I went down and fought this guy, made a couple $100. He was like, oh, okay. Well, guess what I can do with this $200? You're not making any money at all, or making a little bit of money as an assistant coach. You're like, wow, this is like 3 weeks of living for me. Like, this is great, and I'm already training anyway. It wasn't like I was doing anything different. Let's go do this. So it was a lot of fun.
Especially when back then, college coaches were literally making nothing. I mean, I've talked to a lot of guys where they said their wife had to support them to be a college coach because there was literally zero money into it. So
I was the second assistant at OU, making $1,200 a month, and having to run not run practice. I wasn't allowed to run practice, but I would have to run the extra workouts for all the guys. I would have to be there for the morning workouts for the guys that were injured and couldn't run the track. They have to do the Airdyne bikes workout with me instead. And it was just, it was hard. It was a lot of work. You're like, wow. And then I thought I was rich. $1,200, that's a lot of money. Like, I wasn't making anything. I was making $1,200. Then it moved up to $1,500 next year. You're like, oh, wow, make a lot of money. And then you get the first real fight. You're like, oh yeah, I can fight once a month and make 3 times this amount of money. Like, why am I doing this?
And it's way more fun.
Yeah, way more fun, and not as much of a headache.
Talk about the early days of Pride. Did you actually go to Japan for some of those fights?
Yeah, I fought Pride 8, my first fight, Fabiano Iha. I had just moved to LA to train full time. I had just not made the 2000 Olympic team, and I realized that I was never going to beat Joe Williams, and Brandon Slay had just beat Joe. So it was like, I'm never gonna beat these guys. It's not in the cards for me. Mm-hmm. I got to figure out my next step. What's my transition? And so I can figure out what my next job is going to come from. I was like, let me just go fight honestly, my thought was, I'm just going to go fight for a little while to figure out what my next job process is going to be, where I'm going to go next. I didn't realize it was going to become a career because there wasn't any money in it. There really wasn't any money back then. Talk about these guys that fought. There really wasn't hundreds of thousands of dollars to be made, millions of dollars now. There just wasn't, the money just wasn't there. It was still kind of illegal in most states. So you kind of had to figure your way out. The UFC was just getting it, Zuffa had just bought it. They were just trying to get it put back. So Pride in Japan was a spot to go fight because they're paying cash. They're paying a lot of cash, a lot of crooked, Yakuza involved, mob involved movement. And so it was like a lot of cash was being filtered back then. And I went over, the first time I'd ever been to Japan was to fight for Shuto. And I fought Masato Aguilar in a small Shuto fight. I got like $8,000 or $7,000 or something for the win, all in cash. It was like the most amount of money I've ever seen in my life. I was like, this is it. Like, I got this. And back then we were fighting 4 or 5 times a year because you had to make, you didn't put that thought process together, but you had to make the bills meet. You had to fight that much because of the amount of money, but you're like, I can kind of do this. This is kind of something cool. So went and tried it out, and it was great. So Shuto was a small show, super small show, 1,500, 2,000 people, then came back over for, forgive me, another promotion same size, a little bit more money. They went and fought in Pride. 36,000 fans. Pride 8, 36,000. I'm like, what in the living hell? I have, Igor Vovchanchyn and what was his name? Francisco Breno opens the card. That's the first fight of the night.
Oh. And those people love it over there.
Oh, you can't. So if you watch it at home, it's quiet. It's super quiet. You don't see. They're just not a boisterous crowd. It's just not who they are culturally. So very quiet. But you see a transition on the ground, it'll erupt. You're like, what just happened? No, you don't understand how hard it was for him to slide past in that position against that guy. They understand the guy that's being beat. They're like, no, you don't understand. For that to happen, there's so many factors that went on, and they all get it. Everybody gets it. Everybody gets the entire arena. They get everything about the game. So when it erupts, like you can hear the other corner clear as day. Right, like you may in the opposite corner hear your guy like he's in your ear because it's that quiet. But then something weird happens, something funky happens. All of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, it's a totally different ballgame. It's incredible. So when I fought in Pride, and I fought Fabiano was trained down in Huntington Beach at the time, and I'm in El Segundo, so we're about 45 minutes apart. We have to fly to Japan to fight each other. To me, that was amazing. I was like, yeah, we're literally just right there. Why don't we just fight right there? Like, why do we got to go all the way here to fight? We can't do it here. So we went over there and fought, and then it was packed. It was stacked. It was incredible. It was amazing.
And how exciting was it for you to move to LA? You're just kind of like embarking on this wild West career of supporting yourself.
Well, it was tough. I was married at the time. It was tough. Had to convince her that we're going to move. She gave me an ultimatum. Don't ever give your partner an ultimatum. Ever. Because they will balk and push and run away. Don't ever give them an ultimatum. She gave me the ultimatum, we're only going to live here 5 years, then we're going to move back to Oklahoma. That was her ultimatum. Like, if at the end of 5 years, we're moving back. I'm like, well, we're not.
We'll see.
We're not. And then obviously got divorced, and she left, and she's remarried, and as a PhD, went back to school, got a PhD, and doing great. And, she's back in Norman. She's back at OU. Not at OU, but she's at the local high school teaching. She's doing great, but it was not, don't give an ultimatum, because we'll just, especially a dude, because we're always like, oh, we got to be engaged by Christmas? All right, guess New Year's going to be fun for me. I'll be someplace else. It's like, it's got to happen naturally. So it's hard moving there because I had to deal with that ultimatum. I had to deal with trying to find a house and trying to find these things. And like I said, I wasn't making any money. And my wife at the time was making all the money. She was a school teacher. So she was making the steady income, the income that comes in on the bi-weekly basis. Like, she was making the money. So that's how the bills were getting paid until I would fight. And I have this huge amount of money in the account. And then we pay off some bills and pay off some other stuff. And then you're back down to a month worth of living, and then I'd be back to the same routine. So it was a struggle. It was a struggle, but it was fun. It was fun. Showing up every day for practice, teaching classes at the Raw Training Center. I was around Vladimir Menashenko and Rico Chiparelli. I mean, it was a lot of fun. Like, you got some killers in the room. You got some Mac Danzig was with us at the time. You had a lot of great guys in that room, and you had guys who would float in and float out. As a matter of fact, I had guys that were coming in. They were martial artists that were coming in to learn from us, that I now work for in acting and stunts. Like, these guys are now my bosses. And like, oh yeah, remember we used to train together? When Sean Patrick Flannery walks in, the guy from Boondock Saints and Powder, he walked in. He was like, he looks kind of familiar. I don't know from whatever. And he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and we're rolling hard as balls. We're going crazy. And then 15 years later, I walk on set. I'm like, hey, by the way, Sean, hey, Frank Trigg, you remember me? He's like, of course I remember. Yeah, you're killing me today. You're stabbing me in the chest. Okay, all right. And we go through our acting scene, and he's stabbing me in the chest for a movie. It's like, it's surreal, like the amount of guys that came through that room when we were there. It was a lot of fun, but it was also, it's hard like everything else. It was difficult to kind of navigate. Got to find new dry cleaners, got to find a new bank, got to find a new restaurant, got to find a new grocery store, got to figure out the car situation. Like, there's all sorts of stuff going on.
In my mind, I imagine you driving over the hill when the first time you crossed in CLA solo. You got a little car, but it was a quite different reality for you. And it's like, it's a good reminder that sometimes what you think is someone else's experience really is not even close to what it is, No,
man, you get down to El Cajon Pass coming down. That's basically how you have to come. You come to El Cajon Pass, that dump sheet in the Rancho Cucamonga. You come over that thing, and you're like, it's the first time in a long time because you're driving through Vegas. There's no real cities all the way through. Then obviously you got Barstow and some other ones, but nothing crazy. You come over that pass, you see all the lights because that's when we came through. We came through at night. You're like, wow, this is LA. You're not even in LA yet.
Dude.
You're not even in LA yet. You still got another 45 minutes before you hit the outskirts of LA, and then you get another 45 minutes after that to get to where I was living down in Torrance. You're like, geez. And it was pretty. You're right. It was pretty surreal. I totally forgot about that.
It's funny you say that. Well, the only reason I say it's because when I was 19, I drove from Western Illinois to LA to wrestle at a Division II school in Riverside, of all places. I thought Riverside was LA.
Yeah. Right. And that's where we come from. We kind of think like that. Like,
I'm like, all right, 40 minutes from the beach, no big deal, right? That's like 3 fucking hours. You're never getting to the beach from Riverside. You're done.
No, you're never going. Which is why I won't leave the beach. People are like, how come you can live so much cheaper in the valley? But yeah, I'm not leaving the beach. Because if I go to the valley, I'm never going to drive the hour and a half to come to the water. It's just not going to happen.
They call it the Inland Empire for a reason. And I didn't even know that until I got out there. And I'm like, But to your point, I'm 19 in my little station wagon. I'll never forget the drive because the Mojave Desert's so desolate and lonely. And you finally crest that hill and you're like, holy shit, this is LA.
Yeah, this is awesome. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Another 45 minutes. Damn it.
Well, the last thing I wanted to wind down with, man, we've alluded to it. You're known for having an epic, not trilogy, but epic 2 fights with Matt Hughes. I didn't realize your first fight in the UFC was against Matt Hughes.
Yeah, UFC 45. That's what I got in.
Dude.
Back then, trash talking worked.
Seriously, you were the first heel.
No one really did that before me. And it's not me like trying to boast myself up, but that was the game because everybody else was kind of known within their genre before that. Were able to come in, and then of course Chuck and Tito were managed by Dana, so they both were able to get in the UFC. And it was like these guys all got brought in after SCG bought or after Zuffa bought it, and it was one of those things where you're like the only way to get in was to either be training with somebody who's already in, be managed by somebody, and back there's very few managers that had it. Monty Cox, who ran it all in Miltich, and 100 other guys had it in, but he wasn't my manager. So it was like, how do I get in? You got to talk noise. So talk noise on the one guy that's the champ, and that's the only way you're going to be able to do it. You can't talk noise about the guy that's fifth. You got to talk noise about the guy that's champ, so I just talk noise. And I worked myself in. And back then we had like, the underground forums and Sherdog forums, the only place we could go. You go and make a couple posts and talk and make a little fun of some guys and then see what happens. And I got called up, after beating. What helped is I beat Hallman, Dennis Hallman at the WFA. I beat him, and Hallman had already beat Matt twice. So now it's like, oh, you beat Hallman. This is the guy that beat Matt twice, and Matt's the champ. Let's see what happens. And so they brought me over.
Do some MMA math. They bring you in there. What was your A
beats B, B beats C, C beats A, so nothing really works.
No, it never works out. And dude, you're still in the game. I mean, I read an article that said you've either reffed, announced, fought, and pretty much every organization in the world. You're really into it. What's the biggest change between now and then?
So my mom kind of coined the phrase. She's like, "You're a renaissance man for MMA. Like you've done everything in the sport except mop the mat." I'm like, well, if you come early to the amateur events and we're checking the cage as a referee, sometimes we're mopping the mat. Like we got to clean up some stuff that, because they just put the stickers down, Mm-hmm. So when I first started with the UFC, you would call Dana's office and Dana would pick up the phone. So there wasn't a buffer, right? Now you call Dana's office, you get a switchboard. And they're like, we'll take a message. And we'll pass it to his assistant, who will determine whether or not you're worthy of getting past the big man, who then will make a determination if he even wants to talk to you. And the reality of it is, if you don't have his cell phone, you're not getting a hold of him because it's just that big of a deal. They had like 25 people in the office down in Sahara, like maybe I think something like that. They have 2 floors of attorneys now off the 215. Like just 2 floors of attorneys. You're like, it's completely changed. Oh. That's from the administration standpoint. You go to the fights, sometimes there's more media at the fights than there were fans at my fights. It's become that big of a deal. When you have a deal, obviously started with George Greenberg over at Fox Sports, and he gave him a shot and built. Then they jumped over to from Fox, jumped over to ESPN, mm-hmm. which to me at the beginning of the deal was like, why? It doesn't make any sense. then you see what's happening now. You're like, oh, it made sense. I just didn't have the wherewithal to see it.
Yep.
They saw it. I didn't see it. These guys saw it. I'm not. I try to act like I'm in the game. I'm not in the game. It's a whole different game that they're playing.
That's why they're there.
I'm a fan. Like, that was a touchdown, right? Touchdown. Like, this is basketball, man. Like, oh, okay, I'm here. You know, it's like Eddie Murphy and Coming to America. It's like, oh, it was amazing. You're like, no, totally wrong. Everything was wrong. They did a great home run. It was football. Like, what are you talking about? So it's like, that's the kind of mindset. And so now it's a juggernaut of a machine. It is everything. You know, you go to Bellator and UFC are kind of run the same way. From this mindset, you know who is doing what backstage. You know exactly what every person's a role is and their access and what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to work things, and you get all that stuff when you walk in there. You're like, this is it's like a backroom concert. You know, obviously with WMA and IMG and you know, the alphabet soup that owns the UFC. You know, they do concerts quite a bit, so of course it makes sense how they run it. But it's like, it's a whole different ballgame. And that timing, when they tell you the athlete's going to be there at 5:15, you're not waiting on that guy to show up at 5:45, and he's supposed to fight at 6:15, right? If he shows up and he's mad at you because you're trying to do your pre-fight conference, he's wrapping his hands, you know, you're like, dude, it's not my fault. You should be a half hour ago. When they say 5:15, he is there at 5:15. You go to his locker room at 5:15, he is walking the door. You're like, hey, look, let me get this pre-fight conference with you done right away, so we're not having to deal with it in a few minutes. I want you to be able to warm up without me being around. Right, so let's get this done. And then it's easy. It's done. Wow. You know, it's completely changed from that mindset. The biggest change now, there are no fights.
Yeah.
Pandemic, we got no fights. So now it's tough. I just came back from Dubai. Mark Goddard had to work the UFC that was in Abu Dhabi. So I was able to fight the night. I was able to ref the night before in Dubai. They're about an hour and a half apart. It's like 2 different states, but they're only an hour and a half drive apart. And because Mark couldn't leave to do both because you have to stay in quarantine once you get there. So I did my quarantine for Dubai, went and ref, and then came back. But that's the first time I ref since February. There's been no fight since February, and that was like 4 weeks ago. So it's like it's a long drawn out. So unless you're being carried by the UFC or being carried by the Bellator, the rest of us are kind of like we're stuck in limbo. There's no amateur fights for us to get our reps in. There's no pro fights for us to go to because I'm not traveling with the UFC. I'm not licensed in Nevada, so I'm not working those cards there either. And it's just, you know, it's tough right now. But the sport, you know, when they say it's the fastest growing sport, you know, in the world right now, they're not lying, because Formula One can only get so big. There's only so many stadiums that they can put people in. The stadiums are packed out. There's only so many spaces you can go. And there's only so much TV you can watch all the time of these things. That's the juggernaut. That is the biggest sport right now in the world is Formula One. That's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
The UFC is catching them and surpassing. And when they say that they're bigger than the NFL, they might be bigger than the NFL. I know they're bigger than the NBA. You saw the NBA. So? I didn't realize that the Lakers were playing for the finals.
Dude,
I had no idea.
I forgot. I didn't even think that's a real title. I'm like, does that count? And everyone's like, LeBron just won his 4th or 5th. I'm like, what league? Yeah. Like, I don't even know what's going on.
Exactly. So like when they say that UFC is bigger than NBA, yeah. Yep. Oh, I believe that 100%. Baseball might be close. It's going to be kind of tough because a lot of fans like me that I watch a lot of baseball, but I don't go to a lot of baseball games, and I'm always doing something else. So the TV is tracking me being on the baseball station, but I may not necessarily be watching it.
Yeah.
Because the game is so long, and I got other stuff to do.
Yeah.
You know, so it's always like playing in the background. But when you're talking to these other cats, you're talking about like football. It's got to be close, man. It's got to be close right now.
I hope so. Happening. I love it. I think it's amazing. I'm surprised more diehard wrestling fans aren't diehard UFC fans. There is definitely crossover, but not as much as you'd think. Just from running this podcast, I've kind of realized that.
And that is a little disheartening because there's so many guys that are former wrestlers that are champs,
millionaires.
Like, I mean, look at DC. Look at DC. Daniel Cormier. He's a great wrestler from Oklahoma State University. Battle his ass off against a lot of great name guys, and the wrestling fans don't really follow him all that much.
No.
Chael Sonnen, he's your commentator on ESPN, and a lot of wrestlers don't really follow him. They're like, this is a wrestling guy. Like, we're a small community. Wrestlers, if we walk down, you go, hey, jiu-jitsu or wrestling, to a guy with cauliflower ears. He's like, wrestling. Boom, we have a whole different conversation. We're buying beers for each other. We're buying dinner. We've never met. Have no idea. And that guy stopped in high school. Yeah. We have no clue, but he's got the ear. We have a common bond. We can hang out now.
Yep.
We understand what it's like to cut weight. We get the diets. We get the not being able to hang out with our friends during Christmas break and Thanksgiving because we got a tournament coming up. But we knew all these things. We can talk now. We have a conversation. Why the crossover in the MMA isn't bigger with the wrestling fans? I think it's because guys like Cael Sanderson went to coaching instead of coming over to fight.
I also think wrestling's they're not really that braggadocious. They're not that outgoing. They're not, sometimes they're turned off by that. And a lot of wrestlers are kind of quiet, if you think about it.
Oh no, I got a fight with the comedian Adam Hunter. He was like, "You had a great career." I was like, "No, I really didn't have a great career in wrestling or in fighting. If you look at my record, it's not that good. It's really not. 29-9, I think is my fighting record. And the UFC, I think I'm 2-5 or something. Like I'm horrible UFC run. It was like it made no sense. Like I'm not that good. I'm just not. No, but you made the UFC and you had a great wrestling career and blah blah. I'm like, yeah, I was on the US team for 5 years, meaning I was in the top 6 for 5 years, but I was always like 5th and 6th.
Mm-hmm.
One time I made 3rd, but I was never the guy. So I never went to the Worlds, never went to, so I don't have that's the wrestling mentality. Everybody else is second, except for the number 1 guy. And that's the only guy that can talk. And the number 1 guy is like, yeah, but last year I was 4th, so it really doesn't matter. It was like, last year I was 2nd. It really doesn't matter. You're like, you're right, man. We all kind of like, and right now, you and I wrestle right now. Right now, you and I have a match. You win. For that moment in time, right now is the only time you're better than me. The next time we meet, it might switch. And we all know that. Yeah, I beat him last time. Doesn't mean I beat him now, so I better keep my mouth shut.
Right.
I'm gonna get caught. I keep talking noise, I'm gonna get caught. I gotta kind of battle back from it. So yeah, wrestlers don't like to talk much. It's our mentality, it's our culture. Keep it square, keep it straight,
Frank Trigg, I got a sales call that started 1 minute ago, but I got to ask you this question, then we're going to bounce. One word answer. Stylebender John Jones. Are we going to see it?
No.
Dang it.
I know. I want to see it too, and Bender wins at any weight class.
I want to see any fight that I shut the Saturday down for, and I'm strapped in an all-day event on Saturday. Like a big
100% I want to see it. I don't think it's ever going to happen.
Okay.
I really don't.
Frank Trigg.
And Bender can pick the weight class. He can pick whatever weight class he wants. He still wins.
Okay. You heard it here, folks. Frank, this has been awesome, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Sorry I made you late for your meeting.
No problem, man. Take care.
Take care.
And all great things must come to an end. If you want to hear more from the podcast, text WRESTLE to 555-888. That's WRESTLE to 555-888. You can also find us on Instagram, Wrestling Changed My Life, Twitter, Ryan_N_Warner, as well as our website, WrestlingChangedMyLife.com. Take care, y'all. 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 Take care, y'all.